I've never been touched like that, Avery whispered, and the most dangerous man in New Orleans forgot how to breathe. Because sometimes the thing that changes a woman's life isn't violence. It's the first moment someone powerful touches her like she still has a choice. Avery Monroe was just a ballet teacher trying to keep her mother's old studio alive. Rent was late. Her students needed her. Her reckless brother had made one mistake too many. Then one rainy night she walked into Julian Cross's world, a world of black cars, locked doors, old money, and men who smiled while destroying lives. But this is not just a story about a mafia boss and a desperate deal. It's about power, fear, loyalty, and whether love can change a man who built his empire on control. Stay with me until the end and comment where you're watching from. Don't forget to like this video. 48 hours before Avery Monroe stood in that hotel corridor with Julian Cross holding her wrist like it was something precious. She was barefoot in a ballet studio that smelled like floor polish, old wood, and rain. The city outside was waking slowly. New Orleans always did that, stretching itself awake through the sound of delivery trucks, church bells, and distant jazz, bleeding out of bars that never seemed to close. Morning light slid through the front windows of Monroe Dance Academy and caught the dust floating over the studio floor. Avery stood in front of 12 little girls in black leotards and pink tights, her dark hair twisted into a bun so tight it pulled at her temples. Her sweater had a hole near the cuff. Her left ankle ached from an old injury. The rent notice sat unopened on her desk. None of that showed in her voice. Again, she said. A girl named Emma groaned and dropped her arms. Avery raised one eyebrow. Again does not mean punishment. It means the first try was only the beginning. Emma sighed, stepped back into position, and lifted her chin. That's better, Avery said. Now show me you believe you deserve the space you're standing in. The girls moved together not perfectly, but with the kind of effort that made Avery's chest ache. Small arms curved, small feet pointed, small faces tightened with concentration. It was not the grand stage Avery had once dreamed of. No velvet curtains, no orchestra pit, no standing ovation. Still, every morning when the music started, something inside her remembered how to breathe. The studio had belonged to her in every way that mattered. The deed was in her name, but the soul of it belonged to her mother, Lena. Monroe had never become famous, though she should have. She had danced in regional companies' hotel ballrooms, church benefit shows anywhere the floor was flat enough and the pay was not insulting enough to refuse. She had raised Avery alone, working lunch shifts, cleaning offices, sewing costumes until 2 a.m, all so her daughter could stand at a bar and dream bigger than the life they had been given. When cancer hollowed Lena out, she made Avery promise one thing. Don't spend what I leave you trying to keep me here, she had whispered from a hospital bed that smelled like antiseptic and fading flowers. Build something that breathes after me. So Avery did. She bought the narrow building on Dauphine Street. She painted the walls herself. She polished the floors until her knees bruised. She hung her mother's photograph beside the front desk right where every student could see it when they walked in. Some days that photograph kept her standing. Some days it accused her. The music ended. The little girls finished in uneven fifth positions, chests, rising eyes fixed on Avery. She clapped once. Better, not perfect. Better matters more. The class broke apart into chatter. Parents gathered by the door, checking phones, adjusting coats, calling names. Avery smiled, answered questions, promised one mother that her daughter was ready for the spring recital. Promised another that tuition could be paid next Friday, though the truth was she needed it yesterday. When the last child left the studio, fell into a silence that felt too large. Mia Torres appeared from the office doorway with a clipboard pressed to her chest. You want the good news first, or the news that makes me want to drink before noon? Avery walked to the stereo and turned it off. Good news. The advanced class finally nailed the opening combination. Avery smiled. That is good news. Bad news, Mia said, her voice softening. Mr. Landry called again about the back rent. Avery's smile faded. How bad? He said if we cannot give him something by Friday, he has to start formal notices. Avery looked at the mirror wall. One corner had cracked during last year's recital rehearsal when a portable speaker fell against it. She had meant to replace it months ago. "Okay," she said. Mia gave her a look. "That is not a plan. It is a sound I make before I find one." Mia leaned against the desk. "Aves, you know I'll wait on my paycheck. Number. I'm serious." "So am I. You cannot keep paying everyone else first." Avery picked up a stack of enrollment forms and tapped them straight, even though they were already straight. "I can when everyone else has rent, groceries, kids, car payments, and lives that do not pause because my business is gasping for air." Mia's face softened. "This place is not just your problem." Avery looked at her mother's photograph. "Yes," she said quietly. "It is?" Mia did not argue. She had known Avery long enough to understand that some doors did not open from the outside. The rest of the day moved in pieces. Beginner class. Intermediate class. A parent asking for a discount. A teenager crying in the dressing room because her audition video had gone badly. Avery held a shaking hand, fixed a crooked bun, counted music, corrected posture, smiled through exhaustion. By the time she locked the studio, the sky had turned the color of wet slate. Rain fell softly over the street, making halos around the lamps. Avery pulled her coat tight and stood for a moment under the awning, staring at her reflection in the glass door. She looked older than 29. Not old exactly, just tired in places sleep could not reach. Her phone rang. Tyler. Avery almost let it go to voicemail. Her younger brother only called late when he needed something, and lately he had needed too much. Money for a bill. Help with a job application. A place to crash after another fight with another roommate. An excuse. A rescue. Still, he was her brother. She answered, "Ty." For 3 seconds, all she heard was breathing. Then his voice came through, broken and thin. "Ivis." Avery went still. The rain seemed to quiet around her. "What happened?" "I messed up." Her fingers tightened around the phone. "What happened?" "I need you not to yell." "That depends on what you say next." A sound came from him that might have been a laugh if it had not cracked in the middle. "I owe money." Avery closed her eyes. "How much?" He did not answer. She stepped out from under the awning, rain touching her face like cold fingers. "Tyler, how much?" 280,000. For a moment, the street tilted. Avery grabbed the brick wall beside the door. "That is not a number people like us owe." "I know." "No, you do not know. You cannot know because if you knew, you would not be saying it, like you scratched a car." "I was winning at first." Avery laughed once, sharp and empty. "Do not." "I was. I had a system." "Tyler, I thought I could fix everything. I thought I could pay off my cards, help with the studio, get ahead for once." Avery pressed her free hand to her mouth. To who she asked. Silence. Her stomach sank before he said the name. Julian Cross. A bus hissed by on the wet street. Somewhere down the block, someone shouted for a cab. The city kept moving because the city did not care when a life split open. Avery knew the name. Everyone in New Orleans knew the name. Julian Cross owned shipping companies, restaurants, construction firms, private security contracts, and half the rumors that drifted through the city after midnight. Men lowered their voices when they said his name. Reporters rode around him carefully. Police commissioners shook his hand at charity breakfasts and pretended the photographs were not evidence of anything. He was not the kind of man people owed money to. He was the kind of man who made debt feel like a death sentence. "Where are you?" Avery asked. "At my apartment." "Are you hurt?" "No, not yet, not yet." The words moved through her like ice. "Listen to me," she said. "Lock your door. Do not leave. Do not answer for anyone but me." "Avis, I'm scared." She hated him then. For one clean second, she hated him with a force that made her eyes burn. Then he started crying and he sounded 8 years old again, small and motherless in the hallway, while Lena slept through chemotherapy in the next room. Avery swallowed the hatred because there was no room for it. "I know," she said. "Stay there." "What are you going to do?" Avery looked through the studio window at her mother's photograph. I'm going to fix it. The next morning, she dressed like a woman walking into a courtroom. Black dress, low heels, hair pinned back. No lipstick. No jewelry except the watch Lena had given her on her 18th birthday, the one with the cracked face and worn leather strap. Mia was already at the studio when Avery arrived before dawn. You're early, Mia said. I need you to open today. Mia looked up from the desk. Why? Avery moved to the filing cabinet and pulled out the folder with the deed. A private meeting. What kind of private meeting requires that face? Avery forced a smile. The kind where I pretend I am not terrified. Mia came closer. Avery, I cannot explain right now. Is this about Tyler? Avery stopped. Mia's expression changed. Oh, God. What did he do? Avery slid the deed into her bag. I'll call you later. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have. Outside, the city smelled like wet pavement and chicory coffee. Avery took a cab to the business district because she did not trust her hands on the wheel. As the car moved through streets still shining from rain, she watched New Orleans change outside the window, past corner stores and shotgun houses, past iron balconies and sleeping bars, past tourists taking photographs of buildings that had survived storms, fires, and men with too much ambition. Then the cab turned toward the river, and Cross Harbor Tower rose ahead of her, glass and steel. 61 floors, a blade against the gray sky. Avery paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk looking up until her neck hurt. For one wild second she thought about leaving. Let Tyler face it. Let him learn. Let him pay for one mistake with something that did not come out of her body, her work, her life. Then she saw him at 7 years old sitting on the kitchen floor after their mother's boyfriend left for the last time, asking if men always went away when things got hard. Avery walked inside. The lobby was colder than it should have been. Marble floors reflected the ceiling lights. Security guards in dark suits watched without appearing to watch. Behind a black stone desk, a woman with smooth blonde hair and unreadable eyes lifted her gaze. Miss Monroe. Avery stopped. I did not give my name. No, the woman said, you did not. Avery's pulse tapped hard in her throat. The woman stood. Grace Holloway, Mr. Cross is expecting you. Avery held her bag tighter. Of course he is. Grace's mouth almost curved. Elevator on the left, 61st floor. The elevator doors opened without a sound. Avery stepped in and the doors closed on the lobby, sealing her inside a box of mirrored steel. The numbers rose, 12, 20, 33. With every floor, the city she knew fell farther away. By the time the elevator opened, Avery had counted every breath until counting stopped helping. The reception area was quiet enough to hear the rain tapping the windows. The whole floor smelled faintly of leather coffee and something expensive she could not name. No clutter, no warmth. Everything arranged with the kind of precision that made human error feel illegal. Grace appeared from another doorway. This way. Avery followed her down a hall lined with dark-framed photographs of ships' old city maps and buildings Julian probably owned. At the end were double doors. Grace knocked once, opened them, and stepped aside. Miss Monroe is here. Avery entered. Julian Cross stood at the window with his back to her, a phone against his ear. From the 61st floor, New Orleans looked almost peaceful. The river curved brown and wide beneath the morning sky. Rooftops glistened. Traffic moved like veins of light. Julian did not turn. If Mr. Bell wants new terms, he can bring me something worth my time, he said into the phone. Otherwise, the old terms stand. A pause. No, his panic does not interest me. Another pause. Then remind him that consequences are not negotiations. He ended the call. The silence afterward was worse. Julian turned. Avery had seen photographs. Everyone had. Blurry shots from charity events, newspaper images taken from a careful distance, security footage paused on crime blogs by people who liked pretending danger was entertainment. None of them prepared her. Julian Cross was not huge in the obvious way. He was tall, lean, controlled. dark hair combed back silver, just beginning at the temples. A face too sharp to be called handsome without adding dangerous to the sentence. His suit looked made for him because it was. His eyes were gray, not soft gray, not storm gray, but the flat gray of a gun barrel in low light. He studied her for one breath too long. "Miss Monroe." His voice was quiet. Somehow that made it worse. "Mr. Cross, you came alone." "I did." "That makes you brave or badly informed." "Maybe both." Something moved in his expression, not a smile. The ghost of interest. He gestured to the chair in front of his desk. "Sit." Avery sat because her knees were not as steady as she wanted them to be. Julian took the chair across from her, not behind the desk. That surprised her. It made the space feel less formal and more dangerous, as if he had removed the furniture that might have protected her. "Your brother is an idiot," he said. Heat rose to Avery's face. "I know. Do you?" He opened a folder on the low table between them. "Tyler Monroe entered one of my private rooms 3 weeks ago with $800 cheap confidence and the belief that luck rewards desperation." Avery looked at the folder but did not touch it. "He lost," Julian continued. "Then he borrowed. Then he lost what he borrowed. Then he convinced someone dumber than himself that he was good for more." Avery's nails dug into her palm. "How much?" Julian slid a paper toward her. She looked down. $280,000. Beneath it, smaller print. "Interest pending." The room narrowed. "I do not have that," she said. "I am aware. He does not have that. I am also aware." She lifted her eyes. "Then why am I here?" Julian leaned back slightly. That was going to be my question. Avery opened her bag before fear could make her hesitate. She pulled out the folder she had prepared at 3 a.m. while Tyler sat on her couch shaking and swearing he would change. "I own Monroe Dance Academy on Dauphine Street," she said. "The building is small, but it is mine. No mortgage. I have the deed. I can use it as collateral." Julian did not reach for it. Avery kept going. "I have no debt beyond business expenses. I speak French and Spanish. I have experience organizing performances, fundraisers, schedules, accounts. I can work. I can plan events. I can translate. I can teach private lessons to your clients' children if that helps. I can pay this down." Julian's gaze moved from the folder to her face. "At what rate?" Avery faltered. "I can make payments." "At what rate, Miss Monroe?" She hated the calmness in his voice. "I do not know yet." "I do." He picked up another page from his folder. "Your studio is behind on rent. Your spring enrollment is down 18% from last year. You have 3 instructors you pay before yourself. Your insurance premium increased in January. Your savings account has $1,146 in it." Avery felt the blood leave her face. "You had no right." "I had every reason." "That is not the same thing." "No," Julian said. "It is not." The answer was so blunt it stole her next sentence. He reached for her deed then, looked at it, set it back down. "This building was purchased with your mother's insurance money." Avery went still. Julian continued quieter now. "She died 3 years ago. You opened the studio 6 months later. You have kept it alive through bad math and stubbornness." Her throat tightened. "Do not talk about my mother." Julian's eyes lifted. "Then do not put her legacy on my desk like a bargaining chip." The words landed hard because they were true. Avery looked away first. For several seconds, the only sound was rain against glass. "I have nothing else," she said. Julian studied her. "You have yourself." Her head snapped back. "If that means what I think it means, this conversation is over." For the first time, Julian's expression changed. Something cold passed through it. "I do not buy women, Miss Monroe. No, you just buy everything around them until choice becomes decorative." The room went quiet. Avery realized what she had said to a man people did not insult. Julian stared at her. Then he laughed once under his breath. It was not warm, but it was real. "You are either very brave," he said, "or very tired." Avery's voice lowered. "I am both." Julian stood and walked to the window. From behind, he looked less like a man and more like a decision the city had made and regretted too late. I have a problem, he said. Avery frowned. I'm not sure how that helps me. It might. He turned back. I have money, influence, territory, businesses with clean paperwork and dirty reputations. What I do not have is entry into rooms where people pretend their fathers did not steal what they now call heritage. Avery said nothing. Julian came back to the table. I am expanding. Legitimately. Real estate, private security, shipping contracts, civic development. There are people in this city who want my money but will not publicly shake my hand unless someone respectable is already standing beside me. Avery stared at him. You want respectability. I want access. And you think I can give you that? I think you can make people hesitate before they decide I do not belong. She almost laughed. I teach ballet to children. You teach discipline, posture, grace under pressure. You understand donors' mothers' insecure men with expensive opinions and the politics of art boards. You have a dead mother people still remember kindly and a studio no one can connect to me without looking too hard. Avery felt something unpleasant coil in her stomach. You make that sound very romantic. I am not offering romance. Then what are you offering? Julian reached into the folder and withdrew a packet clipped in black metal. A contract. He placed it on the table between them. 6 months. You accompany me to public events, private dinners, cultural functions, and meetings where your presence improves the temperature of the room. You live in an apartment in this building for security reasons. Your studio remains operational. I cover rent, payroll, insurance, utilities, and repairs. Tyler's debt is cleared from my books upon signature. Avery stared at the contract. Her pulse roared. Julian continued. You receive $10,000 monthly for personal expenses. Wardrobe and transport are covered. You follow all security instructions. You discuss none of this with anyone. Avery touched the edge of the packet but did not pick it up. What am I supposed to be? Julian's eyes held hers. Useful. That is not an answer. It is the honest one. You want a girlfriend for hire. Number. A mistress. Number. A prop. His silence lasted half a second too long. Avery stood. I'm leaving. Julian did not move to stop her. Tyler has until midnight tomorrow. She froze. The words did not rise. They dropped, quiet and heavy. When he fails, the debt is sold. The men who buy it will not be interested in your studio, your mother, or your brother's potential for personal growth. Avery turned slowly. You said you do not buy women. I don't. You just threaten their brothers. Julian's eyes hardened. Your brother threatened himself the night he sat at my table and signed for money he did not have. He is 22. Then he is old enough to understand that the world has teeth. Avery stepped closer to him, anger burning through fear. And what about me? What am I old enough to understand? Julian looked at her for a long moment. That saving someone can destroy you. The words struck too close. Avery looked down at the contract. 6 months. The studio safe. Tyler breathing. Her instructors paid. Her mother's building still standing. Her life no longer entirely hers. What happens if I say yes? You move in tomorrow morning. Your first event is tomorrow night. The Crescent City Arts Gala. Of course it is. You will meet Beatrice Ashford. Avery's eyes flicked up. Even she knew that name. Beatrice Ashford ran half the arts funding in New Orleans and influenced the other half from behind rooms full of white wine and old portraits. Julian noticed her reaction. She remembers your mother. Avery's chest tightened. Do not use that. I use what matters. That is exactly what scares me. For the first time, something like weariness crossed his face. It should. Avery looked at the contract again. I have one condition. Julian waited. Tyler does not know. His eyes narrowed slightly. He does not know you signed. He thinks you agreed to a payment plan. He thinks he has to work it off. He thinks I co-signed, and if he misses anything, I suffer too. Why? Because if he knows I did this, he learns nothing. He will cry, apologize, hate himself for a week, then wait for me to save him again. Julian studied her with fresh interest. You want him afraid. I want him awake. Silence stretched. Then Julian nodded once. Agreed. Avery almost hated him for how quickly he understood. Grace appeared 10 minutes later with a printed copy, a tablet, and a pen that probably cost more than Avery's electric bill. She led Avery into a private conference room with glass walls and a view of the river. Avery read the contract for nearly an hour. She did not understand all of it, but she understood enough. Appearances, confidentiality, residence, security, compensation, termination, public conduct, personal risk. That phrase appeared twice. Personal risk. Her hands went cold each time. When she returned to Julian's office, he was at his desk signing something as if her life had not been split into before and after. "I need to see the apartment," she said. He did not look surprised. "Grace will take you." The apartment was 3 floors below his office. Calling it an apartment felt dishonest. It had 3 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, a kitchen no one had ever cooked in, and furniture in soft cream and dark wood, elegant enough to feel impersonal. Eli Stone Julian's head of security waited by the door. He was broad-shouldered, black, calm-eyed, and built like a man who could end an argument by standing up. "Miss Monroe," he said. "I'm Eli. You need anything in this building, you call me." Avery walked to the window. The city below looked unreal. "What happens if I try to leave?" Eli did not smile. "Through the front door or out of the arrangement?" "Either. Front door, you tell security where you're going so we can keep eyes on you. Out of the arrangement, that is between you and Mr. Cross." Avery turned. "That is not an answer. It is the safest one I have." She looked around the beautiful room and saw no bars, which almost made it worse. On the bedroom nightstand sat a vase of white lilies, her mother's favorite flower. Avery's throat closed. Did he know? Eli followed her gaze. "Mr. Cross knows most things." Avery blinked hard. "I'm starting to understand that." At 5 that evening, she stood alone in the apartment, the contract signed on the kitchen counter, her reflection pale in the darkening glass. Her phone buzzed. "Tyler." She answered. "What happened?" he asked, frantic. "Did you talk to him?" "Aves, please tell me you talked to him." Avery looked down at her signature. "It is handled." A sob broke through the line. "Oh God, thank God. How?" "He agreed to a payment plan." "You are working it off." "I am." "Yes? What did you do?" "I co-signed." "Avery." Her voice sharpened. "You miss one payment, ignore one instruction, gamble $1. And I swear to God, Tyler, I will not save you from what happens next." He cried harder. "I'm sorry." She closed her eyes. "I know. I'll fix it." For once, she said, "You are going to have to." She hung up before he could make another promise. Then she called Mia. "I need you to run the studio for a while." Mia was silent. "How long is a while?" 6 months, maybe less. "Avery." "What is going on?" Avery looked at the lilies. "I got a consulting contract. Private client. Arts events, donor meetings, cultural work. The money is good enough to keep the studio safe." "Who is the client?" Avery watched rain begin to streak down the window. "No one you know." She hated how easily the lie came out. Mia did not believe her. Avery could hear it in the pause, but Mia loved her enough not to push where Avery had already locked the door. After the call, the apartment became too quiet. Avery walked into the bedroom and placed her mother's photograph on the nightstand beside the lilies. The cracked watch on her wrist ticked softly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The photograph did not answer. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Julian. "Tomorrow morning. 7 sharp, pack light. Everything else will be provided." Avery stared at the words until they blurred. Outside, New Orleans glowed under rain and streetlight beautiful and dangerous, a city that knew how to hide rot beneath music. By morning, Avery Monroe would no longer belong fully to the life she had built. And somewhere, 61 floors above the river, Julian Cross was already preparing the room where the city would see her for the first time. By morning, Avery Monroe understood that luxury could feel just as frightening as a locked room. The apartment was too quiet when she woke. No children laughing through the studio walls. No Mia arguing with the printer. No traffic rattling the old windows on Dauphine Street. Just the low hum of climate control and the pale New Orleans morning spreading across glass. For a few seconds, Avery forgot where she was. Then she saw the white lilies on the nightstand. She sat up sharply. Her 2 suitcases were still near the closet, barely unpacked. Her mother's photograph stood beside the vase Lena Monroe, smiling in black and white, forever young, forever graceful, forever unaware that her daughter had sold 6 months of her life to a man the city whispered about after dark. Avery looked at the closed bedroom door. No one had locked it. Somehow that did not comfort her. At 7 exactly, someone knocked. Avery pulled on a sweater and opened the door to find Eli Stone standing in the hallway with 2 paper cups of coffee and the calm expression of a man who had already been awake for hours. "Morning, Miss Monroe." She stared at the cups. "Is one of those poisoned?" His mouth twitched. "Only with too much sugar, I guessed." "You guessed wrong." Then Mr. Cross guessed right. Avery took the cup he offered and looked down. Black coffee. 1 splash of cream. No sugar. She hated that Julian knew that. Eli stepped inside only after she moved back. "Stylist arrives at 9. Mr. Cross wants you ready by 6:30 tonight. Car leaves at 6:40. Avery closed the door and followed him into the living room. Does Mr. Cross always communicate through other people? When he thinks people will argue with him, yes. I would argue with him if he were here. I know. Eli's tone was so dry that Avery almost smiled. Almost. "What is tonight exactly?" she asked. "The Crescent City Arts Gala." "I know the name. I mean, what is it really?" Eli looked at her for a moment, measuring how much truth she could carry before breakfast. "It is where people who own the city pretend they are raising money to save it." Avery took a sip of coffee. It was perfect. "And Julian. Mr. Cross wants to be seen in a room that usually only accepts his checks. With me on his arm." "With you beside him," Eli corrected. Avery caught the difference. She did not know whether it was his wording or Julian's. At 9, the apartment filled with strangers. The first was Vivian Cole, a silver-haired woman in a cream suit carrying no bag and still somehow looking like she had arrived with an army. 2 assistants followed with rolling racks of gowns, garment bags, shoes, jewelry cases, and a full-length mirror. Vivian looked Avery over from head to toe. "You are prettier tired than most women are rested. That helps." Avery blinked. "Good morning to you, too." Vivian ignored that and circled her slowly. "You have ballet posture. Thank God. Shoulders back, neck long, no need to teach you how to enter a room. I enter rooms all the time. Not rooms where women compliment your dress while calculating what your absence would be worth." Avery looked at Eli, who had taken up a position near the door. "Is everyone in this world dramatic?" "No," he said. "Some of them are dead." Vivian clapped once, arms out. For the next 3 hours, Avery was dressed, measured, pinned, turned, corrected, and examined under the white bathroom lights like a costume being prepared for opening night. Vivian rejected a black gown for being too obvious, a red one for being too hungry, and a pale blue one for making Avery look like someone's tragic second wife. Finally, she chose silver. The gown was simple until Avery moved. Then the fabric caught the light like rain on the Mississippi. It followed the lines of her body without shouting about them. Elegant, quiet, expensive in a way that did not ask to be noticed because it knew it would be. Avery looked at herself in the mirror and felt a strange grief. The woman looking back did not belong to the studio. She did not smell like rosin and floor polish. She did not check tuition records after midnight or sew ribbons on tiny ballet shoes while eating toast over the sink. This woman looked like she had never worried about a late bill in her life. Vivian stepped behind her and fastened a pair of diamond earrings at her ears. Avery flinched. Vivian noticed. Too heavy. No, just cold. Everything is cold at first. Avery met Vivian's eyes in the mirror. "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "No. It is supposed to make you pay attention." Vivian adjusted the neckline of the dress, then softened a little. "Listen to me, Miss Monroe. Tonight they will look at you and try to decide if you are decoration, leverage, weakness, or bait. Do not help them." Avery swallowed. "How?" "Do not explain yourself." People with power never explain until they are forced. Smile when insulted. Pause before answering. If someone asks how you met Mr. Cross, give them the truth with the bones removed. The truth is ugly. Vivian's eyes sharpened. Most truths are. That is why rich people hire florists. By late afternoon, Avery had studied every name on the guest list Grace sent to her tablet. Beatrice Ashford, Daniel Park, Senator Elaine Mercer, Graham Vance, Councilwoman Helen Royce, museum directors, donors, developers, people whose influence moved through New Orleans like underground water. She tried to memorize faces, marriages, scandals, foundations, business ties. It made her head hurt. At 6:25, her phone buzzed. A message from Julian. Lobby, now. Avery stared at it. Then she typed back. Please. 3 dots appeared. Avery waited. A second message came. Lobby, please. She smiled despite herself hated that she did, and slipped the phone into her clutch. Eli waited by the elevator. You look nice, he said. I look expensive. That too. Do I look terrified? He studied her face. Only to someone paying attention. Will they be? Every single one of them. The elevator ride down felt endless. Avery watched the glowing numbers fall and tried to remember how to breathe through her ribs the way her mother taught her before auditions. When the doors opened to the private lobby, Julian Cross was waiting. He wore a black tuxedo like other men wore skin. No wasted movement, no visible nerves. No sign that the room had shifted around him the moment Avery stepped out of the elevator. But something changed in his eyes. It was quick, almost nothing. She saw it anyway. He looked at her like the sight had interrupted a thought he trusted. Miss Monroe, he said. Mr. Cross. His gaze traveled once over the silver gown, the diamonds, the careful sweep of her hair. Not vulgar. Not lingering. Assessing then something quieter. Vivian chose well. Vivian is terrifying. Yes, that was not a complaint. I know. Eli opened the car door outside. Rain misted the pavement. A black sedan waited under the covered entrance engine running. Julian offered his hand. Avery looked at it. He waited. That mattered, though she did not want it to. She placed her hand in his. His palm was warm. His grip steady, not tight. Inside the car, the city slid past in streaks of gold and black. Bourbon Street noise faded behind them. The hotel rose ahead, old stone, glowing under the rain, its balconies curled like iron lace. Photographers waited near the front entrance, flashes popping whenever a name arrived. Avery's stomach folded in on itself. Julian noticed. Breathe. I am breathing. Not well. She turned her head. Do you always say comforting things like a hostage negotiator? Number. Good. I usually pay someone else to comfort people. The absurdity of it made a laugh escape her before she could stop it. Julian looked at her then, and for one unguarded second he seemed almost pleased. The car stopped at a side entrance away from the cameras. Rules, Julian said. Avery straightened. Of course there are rules. Stay close. Do not wander. 1 glass of champagne, no more. If someone asks a question you do not want to answer, smile, and turn it into a comment about the room, the music, or the cause. If I tell you to leave, you leave. If Eli tells you to move, you move. You make parties sound like crime scenes. Most parties are crime scenes with better catering. She looked toward the hotel doors. What am I to you tonight? Julian's expression stilled. That depends who is asking. I am asking. He held her gaze. Tonight you are the woman I trust to stand beside me. The answer was almost kind. That made it harder to dismiss. Before Avery could respond, he stepped out and came around to open her door himself. Eli watched the sidewalk. Another security man held the hotel door. The whole operation was smooth, silent, practiced. Avery stepped into the hotel on Julian's arm and felt the air change. The ballroom glittered. Chandeliers burned above marble floors. A string quartet played near a wall of white roses. Champagne moved through the room on silver trays. Women wore gowns that cost more than Avery's annual rent. Men laughed with their mouths while watching with their eyes. The conversations did not stop when Julian entered. They lowered. That was worse. Avery felt every gaze touch her. Her dress, her face, her hand resting lightly on Julian's sleeve. The space between their bodies. The question of what she was doing there. Julian leaned closer, chin up. I hate you a little. Only a little. Give me time. His mouth curved, almost invisible. Then they were moving. The first man to approach was broad silver-haired and polished to a shine. Avery recognized him from the guest list. Graham Vance, old money developer, waterfront projects, family name on hospital wings and court documents no one discussed. Julian Graham said, extending a hand. I heard rumors you were coming. I assumed even you had limits. Julian shook his hand once. I try not to disappoint. Graham's gaze slid to Avery. And this must be the reason half the room forgot how to speak. Avery smiled the way Vivian had taught her, slow and unbothered. A generous room. Graham laughed. Beautiful and modest. Dangerous combination. Only to men who confuse modesty with permission. Julian's hand brushed the inside of her elbow. A warning or approval? She could not tell. Graham's eyes brightened. Where did you find her? Avery answered before Julian could. At work. Graham looked amused. What kind of work? I run Monroe Dance Academy. The amusement faded, replaced by interest. Monroe. Lena Monroe's daughter. Avery nodded. For the first time, Graham seemed to see more than the dress. She was a remarkable dancer. Yes, Avery said, she was. Shame how life turns out. Talent does not always protect people from needing help. The insult was delicate, almost invisible. Avery felt it anyway. Julian's voice cooled. Careful, Graham. Graham raised both hands slightly. Just making conversation, then improve. For 1 second, something ugly moved behind Graham's smile. Then he stepped back. Enjoy the evening. When he left, Avery exhaled. Julian did not look at her. You handled that well. He was insulting my mother. Yes. I wanted to throw champagne at him. That would have been less useful, but satisfying. Most mistakes are. Avery looked at him, but before she could answer, a woman's voice cut through the room like smoke over glass. Julian Cross. In my ballroom before the speeches. Either I am losing my touch or you are getting ambitious. Beatrice Ashford approached with a martini in one hand and the kind of authority that made people move without being asked. She was small, white-haired, draped in emerald velvet, and more intimidating than any armed guard Avery had seen all day. Julian's tone changed. Warmer. Respectful, though not submissive. Beatrice. She kissed the air near his cheek, then turned to Avery. So, this is Miss Monroe. Avery held out her hand. It is an honor to meet you. Beatrice did not take the hand immediately. She studied Avery's face, as if searching for someone beneath it. You have Lena's eyes. Avery's throat tightened. You knew my mother. I watched your mother dance Giselle in a church hall with a leaking ceiling and 30 people in folding chairs. She made it feel like the Paris Opera. Avery forgot the room for a moment. She never told me that. Gifted women rarely tell their daughters enough. They are too busy surviving. Beatrice finally took Avery's hand. Do you dance? Not professionally. That was not the question. Avery paused. I teach. Beatrice smiled faintly. A diplomatic answer. I dislike those, but I understand them. She looked at Julian. How did you convince this one to accompany you? Julian answered smoothly. With honesty. Avery almost choked. Beatrice's eyes moved back to her. Was he honest? Avery felt Julian watching. She thought of the contract. Tyler, the apartment, the lilies, the beautiful cage. He was specific, Avery said. Beatrice laughed low and delighted. Oh, I like her. Something in the room shifted after that. Not acceptance, not yet, but permission. People approached more easily. A museum director asked about Avery's studio. A donor mentioned childhood ballet lessons and mispronounced plie so badly, Avery had to bite the inside of her cheek. Senator Elaine Mercer complimented Avery's dress while trying to determine if Julian had bought her, hired her, or fallen for her. Avery smiled, paused, answered just enough. Julian let her. That surprised her most. He stood beside her, calm and dangerous, but he did not interrupt unless necessary. He did not correct her. He did not feed her lines. He watched the room while she worked inside it, and slowly Avery understood why he had chosen her. These people were not so different from parents at the studio. They wanted reassurance, status, flattery, control. They wanted to believe they were kinder than they were and smarter than the person across from them. The clothes were better here. The hunger was the same. At dinner, Avery was seated between Daniel Park and an older museum trustee who spoke only in complaints. Julian sat across from her close enough to observe far enough to make her stand alone. Daniel Park was younger than most of the room, Korean-American, quietly dressed with tired eyes and a watch he never checked, though it was worth checking. He ran a technology company and funded youth education programs across the South. "You look like you're counting exits," he said. Avery glanced at him. That obvious. Only to someone else doing it. She smiled for real. "You do not enjoy these events. I enjoy the cause. I tolerate the performance." That sounds familiar. His phone buzzed. He glanced down and his face changed. Avery noticed before she could stop herself. "Bad news." "My daughter," he said, already typing. "She is 13, at a friend's house. Something is wrong, but she says it is fine, which means it is absolutely not fine." Avery set down her fork. "Ask if she wants you to come get her." Daniel looked at her. "She will say no if she thinks I am angry. Then tell her she does not have to explain first. Tell her you are already on her side." He stared at the phone for a moment, then did as she said. Across the table, Julian had gone still. 15 minutes later, Daniel returned from a call outside the ballroom. His face looked different, shaken and grateful. "You were right," he said quietly as he sat. The friend's parents were fighting. She was scared and did not want to make trouble. Avery's chest softened. She made exactly the right kind of trouble. Daniel looked at her with new respect. "You teach children." "Yes. I imagine you are very good at it." "I try." He looked toward Julian. "Mr. Cross said you were useful." That was an ungenerous description. Avery looked across the table. Julian did not smile, but his eyes held hers for half a second longer than they should have. Later, during dessert, Senator Mercer began speaking about arts funding. Avery found herself answering questions about access, tuition, transportation, and the quiet shame parents carried when they could not afford lessons their children loved. The table listened. Not politely, truly. Avery forgot to be nervous. She spoke of cracked mirrors and donated shoes of children who learned discipline before confidence of art as something that should not require wealth at the door. When she stopped, the silence around the table felt full. Beatrice lifted her glass. "Well, she said that was the first honest thing said at this table all night." Laughter broke the tension. Julian looked at Avery like she had done something far more dangerous than speak. After dinner, the guests returned to the ballroom for dancing and final donations. Avery stood near the edge, her feet aching, her head buzzing from champagne she had barely touched, and conversations she would remember for days. Julian came to stand beside her. "You changed Daniel Park's mind." "About what?" "About me. I talked to him about his daughter." "Exactly." Avery looked at him. "That should not have anything to do with you. In rooms like this, everything has to do with me. That sounds exhausting." "It is efficient." "No," she said quietly. "It is lonely." Julian's face closed. For a second, she thought she had gone too far. Then Graham Vance appeared again, this time with 2 men Avery did not know. "There you are," Graham said. "I was beginning to think Cross had hidden you away before anyone could ask difficult questions." Julian's hand settled lightly at Avery's back. This time she did not flinch, but she did notice. Graham noticed too. His smile sharpened. Possessive Julian, how traditional. Avery felt Julian's fingers tense. She spoke before he did. "I have found that insecure men call it possession when they are not invited close enough to know the difference." One of Graham's companions coughed into his drink. Graham's eyes hardened. Julian leaned toward Avery, his voice low. "Remind me never to make you angry in public." "You did not need the reminder." For the first time that night, Julian smiled where people could see it. The room saw. Avery saw the room seeing. That was when she understood. Every glance, every whisper, every raised eyebrow was being filed away. By morning, people would not be asking why Julian Cross came to the gala. They would be asking who Avery Monroe was and why a man like Julian looked at her like she had surprised him. The thought frightened her more than the diamonds. In the car after midnight, Avery leaned her head against the seat and closed her eyes. "You did well," Julian said. "Do you compliment everyone like an employer reviewing performance? Number. Lucky me. You were better than I expected." She opened her eyes. "That is still not charming." "I am not charming. That is the first honest thing you have said all night." He turned toward her. "I was honest with Beatrice. You told her you convinced me with honesty." "I did. You threatened my brother with debt collectors. I also gave you exact terms." Avery stared at him, tired, anger rising. "You really do think specificity is morality?" Julian's jaw tightened. "No, I think lies are expensive. So is truth when you only tell the parts that benefit you." The car went quiet. Outside New Orleans passed in wet gold and deep shadow. Julian looked out the window. "You were right about one thing tonight." Avery waited. "It is lonely." She turned her head. He did not look at her. The admission sat between them small and heavy. At the tower, Eli walked them up. Avery expected Julian to leave her at the elevator, but he followed her into the apartment. She was too tired to object. She kicked off her heels the moment the door closed and nearly groaned with relief. Julian went to the bar cart. "Wine. I thought I was limited to one glass. At the gala. So I am allowed to make bad decisions in private." He looked at her. "Are you planning to?" The question was too quiet. Avery looked away first. "Wine is fine." He poured red into 2 glasses and handed one to her. She took it carefully, their fingers not touching. They sat across from each other, the city spread beneath them. For once, Julian seemed less like a crime boss and more like a man who had forgotten what to do when no one was asking him for anything. "Why do you want in so badly?" Avery asked. He swirled the whiskey in his glass. "In. To their world." His mouth hardened. "I do not want in, I want the doors open." "Same thing." "No. Wanting in means I value what they are. Wanting doors open means I value what they control. Money. Legitimacy. Permits. Influence. Protection that comes from being considered useful instead of dangerous." Avery studied him. "And after you get it, then I build things no one can take from me." The answer came too quickly, too practiced. Avery looked toward her mother's photograph, now sitting on the side table where she had moved it before leaving. "My mother used to say buildings remember the hands that made them." Julian followed her gaze. "She sounds sentimental." She was tired. Tired people get honest. He absorbed that. "What did she want for you?" Avery laughed softly. "Everything. And you." The question caught her off guard. No one asked that. They asked about the studio her students Tyler Bill's recital dates. They asked what needed fixing, not what she wanted. "I wanted to dance," she said finally. "Professionally, New York maybe, a company, a stage big enough to make all her sacrifices worth it." "What happened?" "I was good." That does not sound like failure. In ballet, good is where dreams go to die quietly. Julian said nothing. Avery looked down at her wine. "I auditioned for a year. I watched girls younger than me walk into rooms and become futures I could not have. Then my mother got sick. Then she died. Then the insurance check came, and I had to decide whether to chase a dream that had already said no or build something that might say yes to other girls." She swallowed. "So I built the studio." Julian's voice was softer when he spoke. "And Tyler." Avery's hand tightened around the glass. "Tyler was 8 when Mom started getting sick. I was 19. I packed his lunches, signed school forms, lied to landlords, learned which bills could wait and which ones turned into threats. You became his mother." "No," Avery said sharply. Then softer, "I became the person who stayed." Julian watched her across the low light. "That is not the same as being responsible for every fall he takes." She stood before the words could get deeper under her skin. I should sleep. Julian stood too. Avery. It was the first time he had used her first name. She stopped near the hallway. He seemed to realize it at the same moment she did. "You were extraordinary tonight," he said. The compliment was quiet, unguarded. Nothing like a performance review. Avery did not know what to do with it, so she gave him the only truth she had left. "I was scared the entire time." Julian looked at her. "I know. And you still brought me there." "Yes." "Will it get easier?" His silence answered before his mouth did. "Number." Avery nodded once. At the bedroom door, she looked back. Julian stood alone in the living room, black tuxedo whiskey glass. City lights behind him, looking like a man surrounded by everything he had conquered and nothing he could trust. For one dangerous second, Avery felt sorry for him. Then she remembered Tyler, the contract, the rules, the way Julian's hand had settled at her back before the room could decide what she was worth. She closed the bedroom door. Julian remained in the apartment for several minutes after she left, listening to the soft click of the latch. Then he took out his phone and opened a private document Grace had sent him the week before. Revenue streams. Holdings. Silent partnerships. Rooms where desperate men gambled away money they did not have. His thumb hovered over one line. Private gaming operations. He stared at it for a long time. Then he typed one word beside it. Review. Outside, rain kept falling over New Orleans, washing the streets clean for a few hours, before morning taught them how to be dirty again. The word review stayed on Julian Cross's private document like a match waiting for air. For 2 days, Avery did not know about it. She only knew that her life had developed a rhythm she had never agreed to, but could no longer pretend was temporary in any simple way. Mornings belonged to the studio, even from 60 floors above the city. She answered emails from parents at the kitchen island while sunlight spilled across marble counters. She checked payroll. She approved music for the spring recital. She video called Mia between classes and pretended the apartment behind her was a hotel suite paid for by a cultural consulting client with more money than patience. Afternoons belonged to fittings, briefings, names, faces, histories. Evenings belonged to Julian, not in the way the gossip blogs were already beginning to suggest. There had been one photograph from the gala, blurry but clear enough, Julian in black. Avery in silver. His hand at the small of her back. Her head turned toward him. The caption had called her a mystery brunette. Mia sent the photo with one message. "Please tell me this is part of the consulting job." Avery stared at it for almost 10 minutes before typing back. "It is complicated." Mia answered immediately. "That is never good." Avery did not reply. On Friday evening, Vivian arrived with a dark green dress and a warning. "Tonight is not old money," she said, holding the dress against Avery's body. "It is art money. Younger, crueler, and convinced cruelty is taste." Avery looked at herself in the mirror. "Fantastic. I was worried rich people might become pleasant." Vivian made a sound that might have been approval. "The gallery opening is smaller than the gala. That makes it more dangerous." "How does that work?" "At a gala, people perform for the crowd. In a gallery, they perform for each other. It gets intimate. Intimate people say uglier things." Avery lifted her arms while Vivian adjusted the waist. "Does everyone in Julian's life come with a warning label?" Vivian paused. "Mr. Cross is the warning label." By 7, Avery was in the back of the black sedan with Julian beside her, the French Quarter sliding by in neon and rain. He had been quiet since she entered the car. Not cold exactly, focused somewhere inward. Avery watched his reflection in the window. "Are you going to tell me what tonight is really about? Or, should I guess, based on how many security guards are pretending not to follow us?" Julian's mouth moved slightly. "There are only 3. That I can see." 5, he said. "At least you are honest about surveillance. Only when caught." She looked away so he would not see the smile. The gallery was in the warehouse district, all exposed, brick-polished concrete white walls, and people wearing black as if color were a moral failure. Abstract paintings hung under precise lights. Waiters moved through the room with trays of champagne. No one looked drunk. Everyone looked hungry. Julian placed his hand near Avery's back without touching. She noticed. He noticed her noticing. Better, he asked quietly. Better. They moved through the room together. This crowd did not fall silent the way the gala had. It turned sharper. People here wanted to seem unafraid of Julian Cross. They overcorrected with lazy smiles and raised eyebrows, pretending his presence was a curiosity rather than a threat. Julian stopped before a massive canvas painted in violent shades of blue. Avery tilted her head. What is it? Expensive. That is not an art movement. It is the only one everyone here understands. She glanced at him. You do not like it. I do not need to like it. Then why are you here? He looked around the room. Because by morning, 3 people will tell 7 others that Julian Cross attended a local artist's opening and bought work without asking the price. Is everything a move? Usually. That sounds exhausting. You said that before. It keeps being true. A young woman with paint under one fingernail stood near the far wall, trying not to stare as Julian's assistant spoke to the gallery director. When the assistant returned, Julian signed a small card without reading it. The artist's face went pale. Avery watched her cover her mouth. How much did you just spend? Enough. On a painting you do not like. On a career that will now survive another year. Avery turned to him. That answer had not been what she expected. Julian kept his eyes on the canvas. Do not make me noble. It was still a move. Maybe Avery said. But it moved something real. His gaze flicked to hers. For a moment, the room softened around them. Then a woman's voice sliced through it. Julian. I wondered how long it would take before you started collecting artists, too. Avery turned. The woman approaching was in her 30s, tall, copper-haired, beautiful, in a way sharpened by bitterness. Her black dress was simple, but everything about her announced damage dressed as elegance. Julian's face emptied. Laurel. Avery remembered the name from Grace's briefing. Laurel Hayes. Former gallery owner. Former tenant in a Cross property. Former rising star in the New Orleans art scene before her gallery closed 2 years ago. Laurel's eyes moved over Avery. So this is the new one. Julian's voice dropped. Careful. Laurel smiled. I used to hear that word often. Usually right before you took something. Avery felt the air tighten. Julian did not move. You lost money for 18 months. I lost a space. You lost a business. I lost a dream. Laurel snapped, then caught herself and laughed too brightly. But of course, men like you never know the difference. People nearby had begun pretending not to listen. Laurel stepped closer to Avery. Be careful, sweetheart. He makes ruin sound reasonable. First, he tells you it is business. Then he tells you it is protection. Then one day you are standing in the wreckage of your life while he explains how efficiently it happened. Avery felt Julian go still beside her. Laurel, he said. No. Laurel said, her eyes flashing. Let her hear it. Does she know what you do when someone stands between you and a building you want? Does she know how quickly you can turn a signed lease into a memory? Or did you dress it up for her the way you dress up everything? Julian's jaw tightened. We are leaving. Avery looked at him. We just arrived. I said, we are leaving. This time his hand did close around her wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, hard enough to command. Avery looked down at his hand. Julian saw it too. Something dark moved across his face, but he did not release her until they were outside. The car ride back to the tower was silent. Rain battered the windows. Eli drove with both hands on the wheel and eyes forward. Julian sat rigid beside Avery, anger radiating from him like heat from black pavement. When they reached the apartment, Avery stepped out before Julian could offer his hand. He followed her inside. The door closed behind them. She was lying, he said. Avery turned slowly. About what? Julian removed his cufflinks with short, controlled movements. I never wanted her. I never touched her. I never asked. That was not the only thing she said. His eyes lifted. She was hemorrhaging money. The building was valuable. I had an offer from a hotel group that made sense, and her gallery was in the way. Yes? The honesty landed between them. Avery crossed her arms. Did you warn her? I gave notice. That is not what I asked. Julian's face hardened. No. I did not warn her that the dream she built would not survive my better offer. Avery absorbed that. Outside, thunder rolled low over the city. Julian paced to the window. She turned it into something personal because failure needs a villain. And were you one? He turned. The question struck like an insult because it was not spoken as one. For a long moment he said nothing. Then his voice dropped. Yes. Avery's anger shifted, not gone, but changed by the weight of the admission. Julian looked almost disgusted with himself. I did not ruin her because she rejected me. I ruined her because she was inconvenient. At the time, that felt cleaner. Avery stepped closer. Cleaner than what? Wanting to. The words were barely audible. Avery held still. Julian looked at her then, and for once there was no performance in him. No smooth cruelty. No polished control. Just a man staring at a version of himself he could no longer fully defend. You told me I could be different, he said. I said you could choose differently. That is a pretty sentence from someone who has not had to hold an empire together with both hands around its throat. No, Avery said quietly. I just held a family together with both hands around my own. He flinched. She did not apologize. You think violence is the only thing that leaves bruises, Julian. It is not. People like Laurel bleed too. They just do it in closed galleries and polite conversations. He looked away. Avery softened despite herself. Why are you telling me the truth? His answer came after a long silence. Because you would know if I lied? That was dangerous. Not because it was romantic. Because it sounded like trust. The next night, Beatrice Ashford's invitation arrived on thick ivory paper delivered by hand. Dinner at her Garden District house. 8 guests, 7 o'clock. Julian read the card once and set it down. Avery watched him from the kitchen island. You look like someone just handed you a verdict. Beatrice does not host people by accident. So this is important. Yes, to your doors. To my doors, he said. Vivian sent a deep blue dress this time, elegant and almost severe. Avery wore her hair low at the neck and Lena's old watch beneath the sleeve where no one could see it. Beatrice's house was not what Avery expected. It was not enormous, not flashy. A brick mansion behind black iron gates, its porch lit warmly, its garden wild, in a way Money had carefully arranged to look natural. Inside, the air smelled like old books, gardenias, and bourbon. Beatrice greeted them herself. Julian. Avery, you are early enough to be respectful and late enough not to seem desperate. Well done. Avery liked her before she could stop herself. The dinner guests were already gathered in the library. A museum director Avery recognized. Daniel Park. Senator Mercer. Councilwoman Helen Royce, whose smile looked like it had been sharpened on policy. 2 donors. 1 retired judge. Julian's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Avery saw it because she had spent years watching dancers hide pain. Beatrice saw it too. Dinner began pleasantly. Too pleasantly. They spoke of arts funding school programs, restorations, public safety, city permits. Avery answered when asked and listened when not. Julian stayed calm, charming in the measured way of a man who knew charm was another kind of blade. Then Councilwoman Royce set down her wine glass. Mr. Cross, are we meant to discuss your civic ambitions without discussing how you acquired the resources to pursue them? The table went quiet. Beatrice's eyes narrowed. Helen. No, Julian said. Let her ask. Helen turned fully toward him. 15 years ago, the Bellamy family sold you their warehouse property at half value after their daughter was attacked outside a nightclub. You built your first major shipping operation there. Do you deny it? Avery's stomach tightened. Julian's face did not change. I do not deny the purchase. Convenient tragedy. I had nothing to do with the attack. So the investigation said. So the evidence said, Julian replied. Helen leaned back. But you profited. Yes. The table absorbed that one word. Avery looked at him. Julian placed both hands on either side of his plate, not touching the silverware. I saw grief and panic, and I treated them as market conditions. I did not break that family. but I benefited from the fact that someone else had. At the time, that distinction was enough for me. No one moved. Avery felt the honesty like a door opening in a burning room. Helen's expression shifted, not softened, but unsettled. And now, Julian looked at Beatrice first, then at Avery. Now I understand that legal and clean are not always the same thing. Beatrice lifted her glass, studying him over the rim. That is almost a conscience, Julian. No, he said, it is an audit. Avery nearly smiled. Beatrice did. After dinner, Beatrice took Avery into the garden. Rain had stopped, leaving the stones dark and shining. Music drifted faintly from inside. You unsettle him, Beatrice said. Avery looked at her. I mostly annoy him. Same thing for a man like Julian. They walked past rose bushes trembling with water. I have known him 8 years, Beatrice continued. He used to answer embarrassment with punishment. Tonight, Helen cornered him at my table, and he answered with truth. That does not erase anything. No, it makes the next thing possible. Avery stopped near a fountain. I did not sign up to fix him. Beatrice turned her face unreadable in the garden light. Good. Men like Julian are not fixed by women. They are changed by what they choose when the woman leaves the room. Avery looked back toward the house. Through the window, she could see Julian standing alone near the fireplace, Daniel speaking beside him, his profile cut in amber light. He scares me, Avery said. He should. That is not comforting. It was not meant to be. Beatrice's voice softened. But fear is not the only thing you feel. Avery had no answer. The days after Beatrice's dinner became strange in their gentleness. Julian stopped sending commands without pleas. It was such a small thing that Avery hated noticing it. He asked before entering her apartment. He sent schedules instead of orders. When she mentioned Mia was struggling with recital planning, a new printer arrived at the studio anonymously. Avery called him immediately. I know it was you. You needed a printer. I needed to be asked. A pause. Do you want me to take it back? No, I want you to understand why I am angry while I keep it. Another pause. I am learning that is possible. One afternoon, Avery found him in his office watching a rehearsal video Mia had sent her. On the screen, Emma stumbled through a turn, caught herself, and tried again. Avery stood in the doorway. Are you spying on children now? Julian did not look embarrassed. Her left side is weaker. Avery stared at him. You do not know what that means. I know she falls less on the right. Despite herself, Avery laughed. Julian looked up. The sound changed the room. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then his phone rang and the softness vanished. 2 nights later, Avery's phone rang just after midnight. Mia. Avery answered from bed, already afraid. Mia. For 1 second there was only crying. Then Mia said, Aves, you need to come to the studio. The studio windows were shattered. The front door hung crooked from one hinge. Costumes had been ripped and scattered across the floor like wounded birds. Paint streaked the mirrors in black lines. The little desk where students signed in was overturned. Avery stepped inside and could not breathe. Then she saw the wall. Cross owns what you love. The words were painted above her mother's photograph, which lay on the floor in broken glass. Avery crossed the room and dropped to her knees. Her hands shook as she lifted the frame. A crack ran across Lena's face. Mia stood behind her, crying silently. I am so sorry, Mia whispered. I locked up. I swear I locked up. Avery could not answer. Black cars arrived outside within minutes. Julian entered first, Eli behind him, then 2 men Avery did not recognize. Julian took in the broken mirrors, the paint, the message on the wall, and finally Avery on her knees with the cracked photograph in her lap. Something in his face went dead. Not cold. Dead. Who was here, he asked. Mia stepped back. Avery stood slowly. Do not. Julian's eyes did not leave the wall. Avery. Look at me. He did. The force of his attention almost made her step back. Do not become worse because I got hurt, she said. His voice was soft. They touched what matters to you. And if your answer is to destroy them, then they were right about you. Julian looked at the broken room again. For a moment she thought he would not hear her. Then he turned to Eli. Cameras. Street feeds. Every permit application within 3 blocks. Quietly. Eli nodded. No violence, Avery said. Julian looked back at her. That is not a promise I make lightly. Then make it heavily. The silence stretched. Finally, Julian said no violence. By morning, his people had a name. Graham Vance. Not directly, of course. Men like Graham did not carry paint cans through broken glass. But money had moved from one shell company to another. 2 men with records had been seen near the studio. One had a cousin employed by a Vance construction subcontractor. Julian did not break Graham's legs. He did not send men to his house. He did not make him disappear into the wet dark near the river. He made phone calls. Permits stalled. Investors reconsidered. A waterfront development suddenly faced environmental review. A bank withdrew financing after receiving a packet of old discrepancies. Reporters received anonymous documents. By Friday, Graham Vance's most important project was bleeding in public. Julian came to the studio that evening while contractors replaced the last mirror. Avery stood barefoot in the center of the room, watching her new reflection appear panel by panel. "It is handled," he said. She turned. "How?" He removed his gloves slowly. "Legally." "That was not my question." Julian's jaw tightened. "He will not touch your studio again." "What did you do?" "I showed the city what he had hidden badly." Avery walked closer. "And you enjoyed it?" His silence answered. Her chest ached with disappointment sharp enough to feel personal. "You did not break his bones, so you think this is growth. He attacked you. He attacked my studio. You attacked his life. He deserved worse. That is not the point." Julian's eyes darkened. "Then tell me the point, Avery." She stood close enough to see the exhaustion under his control. "The point is not whether he deserved it. The point is who you become when someone gives you a reason." The words landed. For a long time, Julian said nothing. The contractors left quietly, one by one, sensing the room no longer belonged to them. Rain began again outside. Avery turned away and walked to the bar. The new mirror reflected Julian behind her, tall and still and terribly alone. She placed one hand on the wood and rose slowly onto point in bare feet. Not fully, not safely, just enough to feel the old dream pull through her bones. Julian watched, but did not come closer. For once, he did not cross the line. "I do not know how to love anything without trying to protect it," he said. Avery lowered herself back to the floor. Her reflection looked tired but whole. "Protection without trust is just another cage," she said. Julian closed his eyes. When he opened them, he looked like a man who had finally seen the bars. Avery wanted to believe that was enough. She wanted to believe a man could look at the cage he had built and stop calling it shelter. She wanted to believe the broken mirrors, the painted threat, the cracked photograph of her mother, and the ruin Graham Vance had tried to leave behind would make Julian choose differently the next time anger put a weapon in his hand. But belief was fragile. It did not survive long in a city like New Orleans, where pretty balconies hid rot, where old money wore perfume over blood, where men like Julian Cross could make destruction look clean if they used lawyers instead of fists. The studio reopened 3 days after the attack. Avery insisted. Mia argued. Eli argued. Julian did not argue, which somehow made Avery more nervous. He only stood in the doorway of the studio that morning, while the first children arrived with wide eyes and cautious steps, their mothers whispering near the front desk as if the building had been sick and needed quiet. The new mirrors gleamed too brightly. The fresh paint on the wall was a shade off from the rest. Lena Monroe's photograph sat behind the desk in a new frame, the crack gone from the glass, but not from Avery's memory. Emma. The little girl, who always fell out of turns, came in holding a bouquet of grocery store daisies. "For the studio," she said. Avery knelt to take them. "They're beautiful." Emma looked past her at Julian, who stood in his black suit near the door like a storm cloud pretending to be furniture. "Is he the scary man from the news?" Avery heard Mia suck in a breath. Julian heard it too. His face did not change. Avery looked at Emma. "He is a man who helped us fix the mirrors." Emma considered that. "Does he dance?" Avery almost smiled. "Number?" Julian said absolutely not. Emma looked disappointed. You should. Miss Avery says dancing makes people less stiff. Mia turned away, coughing into her hand. Julian looked at Avery. For a second, something warm passed between them. Small, uninvited, dangerous. Then Avery stood, clapped her hands, and called the class to the bar. Life tried to resume. The children stretched. Parents paid late tuition. Mia answered phones. Avery corrected posture, counted music, fixed ribbons, and pretended not to notice Julian's security men stationed across the street. By late afternoon, she was alone in the office, sorting invoices when her phone began to vibrate across the desk. Tyler. She stared at his name until the call ended. It rang again, and again. On the fourth call, she answered. What? His breathing was uneven. Aves, what did you do? Avery went cold. What are you talking about? What did you do with Cross? She stood slowly. Tyler. No. Do not use that voice. I talked to a guy from the warehouse. He said there was never a payment plan. He said the debt disappeared because Cross got something better. Avery closed her eyes. The office felt too small. Where are you? Is it true? Where are you? Is it true? He shouted. Mia appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. Avery turned away from her. Tyler, calm down. Did you sell yourself to him? The words hit with such force that Avery could not speak. Mia's face changed. Avery gripped the phone. Do not ever say that to me again. Tyler was crying now, angry and ashamed, and still somehow making it about his pain. What else am I supposed to think? You moved into his building? You show up in pictures with him. People are saying things. People say things because they are cowards with mouths. You lied to me. Yes. Why? Because you needed to feel the weight of what you did. I did feel it. No, Tyler, you were scared. That is not the same. He made a broken sound. I cannot believe you did this. Avery laughed, once the sound sharp enough to hurt. You cannot believe I did this. I cannot believe you walked into a private gambling room, borrowed money from a man like Julian Cross, lost enough to destroy both our lives, and still found a way to make my sacrifice feel like your betrayal. Silence. Then Tyler whispered, I did not ask you to. Avery's eyes burned. No. You just made sure I was the only person standing close enough to catch the fall. She hung up before he could answer. Mia stood in the doorway, pale. Avery. Not now. Is it true? Avery looked at her friend at the worry and hurt in her eyes. The lie rose automatically, then died. Yes. Mia's face crumpled. Oh, honey. That softness almost undid her. Avery grabbed her bag. I need air. She left through the back door before Mia could follow. The alley behind the studio smelled like damp brick and trash bins and old rain. Avery pressed both palms against the wall and tried to breathe, but there was not enough air in New Orleans. Her phone buzzed. Julian. She did not answer. It buzzed again. Then a message appeared. Where are you? She stared at it until the letters blurred. Another message. Eli said you left through the back door. Answer me. Avery typed with shaking fingers. Do not monitor me. The reply came almost instantly. You are a target. She laughed under her breath, but it sounded like something breaking. No, I am a person. She shoved the phone into her bag and started walking. She did not know where she was going until she found herself outside Tyler's apartment building an hour later. The place was ugly. 2 stories of peeling paint and flickering lights near a corner store that sold cigarettes, lottery tickets, and cheap beer. Tyler opened the door before she knocked twice. His eyes were red. His hair was a mess. He looked younger than 22 and older than he had any right to. For a second, they just stared at each other. Then he said, I'm sorry. Avery slapped him. The sound cracked through the hallway. Tyler's head turned with it. He did not raise a hand. He did not speak. Avery's palm burned. Do not make what I did sound dirty, because you cannot stand looking at what you caused. His face collapsed. I know. No, you do not know. You think shame is the same thing as understanding. It is not. He wiped his face with both hands. I thought I could win. You thought you could cheat consequence. I wanted to help. Avery stepped into the apartment and shut the door behind her. The place was a mess. Pizza boxes, laundry, a stack of unopened mail. On the coffee table was a folded paper with Julian's company logo at the top. Avery picked it up. "What is this?" Tyler looked away. "My work schedule." "For who?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Cross-security logistics." The room went very still. Avery looked down at the page. Warehouse shifts. Delivery checks. Mandatory financial counseling. Weekly progress reports. Her pulse slowed into something dangerous. "How long?" "A few weeks." "Who arranged this?" Tyler did not answer. "Tyler." "Cross." Avery's voice dropped. "You were supposed to believe the payment plan was between you and him, not become one of his employees. He said it was better this way," he said. Tyler looked miserable. "I did not know what else to do." Avery folded the paper carefully. "Did you sign anything?" "Yes." "Did you read it?" He looked down. Avery closed her eyes. Of course he had not. For her whole life, Tyler had jumped and trusted Avery to find the ground. But this time Julian had built the ground for him, quietly, efficiently, without asking her. Avery left Tyler's apartment with the paper in her bag, and a coldness in her chest that no Louisiana heat could touch. Julian was waiting in her apartment when she returned. She was not surprised. That made it worse. He stood near the windows, still in his suit, the city glittering below him. Avery closed the door behind her. "You put Tyler to work." Julian turned. "Yes." "You had him sign documents." "Yes." "You monitored him, directed him, controlled where he worked, who he reported to, what he paid, what he thought he owed." Julian's expression stayed calm, but his eyes sharpened. He needed structure. He needed truth. He needed consequences. He needed to grow up. "You gave him another powerful person to obey." Julian's jaw tightened. "That is not what happened." "That is exactly what happened." Avery pulled the folded paper from her bag and threw it onto the table. "You took my condition and turned it into a system. Your condition was that he believed he had to work off the debt. My condition was that he learn. Not that you manage his life from behind a curtain. He would have run. Then let him run." Julian stared at her. Avery stepped closer. "Let him fail. Let him be angry. Let him hate me. Let him face something that is not quietly arranged by someone else before he gets there." Julian's voice hardened. "You do not know what men like Tyler become when no one stops them." "Yes, I do. I raised one." The words hit them both. Avery's throat tightened, but she kept going. "I spent half my life stopping him. I did not ask you to take over. I was protecting you." "No. You were protecting the version of me that stays useful to you." His eyes flashed. "That is not fair. Neither is a contract signed by a terrified woman whose brother was drowning in your debt." Julian went silent. The words changed the room. Avery saw it hit him. Not fully, not enough, but somewhere deep enough to hurt. He looked away first. "I cleared that debt. You created the room where he could bury himself in it. He chose to gamble, and you chose to profit from desperation." Julian's face closed, the old armor sliding back into place. "You knew who I was when you signed." Avery nodded slowly. "I did, but I think I forgot who I was." She walked past him into the bedroom. "Avery." She did not answer. She pulled her suitcase from the closet and laid it on the bed. Her hands were steady now. That scared her. Calm had always been her final defense before collapse. Julian appeared in the doorway. "What are you doing?" "Leaving. The contract has 3 months remaining. Then sue me. You know I would never." "I do not know what you would never do, Julian. That is the problem." He stepped into the room. She turned sharply. "Stop." He stopped. The fact that he obeyed almost broke her. Avery opened drawers and began folding the clothes she had brought from home. Not Vivian's gowns. Not the silk pajamas Julian's people had stocked. Not the designer coats or shoes or jewelry. Only her old jeans, sweaters, black leotards, and the worn cardigan her mother used to wear during rehearsals. Julian watched her pack like a man watching a house burn with his hands tied. "I can fix this," he said. Avery laughed softly. "That is what you do, isn't it?" "Avery, no. You fix, you arrange, you remove obstacles, you punish threats. You cover costs. You buy replacements. You make the world safer by making it smaller." He said nothing. She zipped the suitcase. "You touched my wrist that night like I had a choice." His face changed. Avery looked at him through tears she refused to let fall. "I think that is why I stayed longer than I should have. Because for 1 second you asked. I can ask now." "No," she whispered. "Now you want to ask because I am already leaving." He stepped closer, then stopped himself. "I love you." The words entered the room quietly. No music, no thunder, no cinematic mercy. Just a man saying something too late. Avery closed her eyes. When she opened them, Julian looked almost afraid. "That may be true," she said, "but you do not know how to love without holding the key." He flinched. "I can learn." "I believe that." The hope in his eyes was unbearable. She picked up her suitcase. "But I cannot be your lesson." She walked past him. In the living room, she paused beside the table and removed the diamond earrings Vivian had sent for the next event. She placed them beside the contract folder. "Keep the apartment. Keep the dresses. Keep the story everyone wants to believe." Julian's voice was rough. "What do you want me to do?" Avery looked back. "Nothing." The word wounded him more than anger would have. "You do not get to follow. You do not get to send Eli. You do not get to call Mia. You do not get to solve the pain of losing me by managing it better." He stood still. She opened the door. "I was never yours," she said. "Not when you protected me. Not when you frightened me. Not when I wanted you. Not even when I almost forgot." Then she left. Julian did not stop her. That was the first thing he did right. Avery spent the night in the studio office on the old couch beneath a thin blanket and the humming fluorescent light. Mia sat with her until 2 in the morning, then fell asleep in the desk chair with her arms crossed and her chin tucked to her chest. Avery did not sleep. At dawn, she stood barefoot in the studio and looked at the mirrors. For the first time in weeks, every reflection belonged only to her. It should have felt like freedom. It felt like grief. Across the city, Julian Cross stood in his office while the sun rose over the river. Grace Holloway entered at 7:30, took one look at him, and did not offer coffee. That bad. Julian did not turn from the window. She left. Grace was silent for a moment. Good. He turned then. Her face was calm, but her hands were tight around her tablet. Julian's voice cooled. "Careful." Grace lifted her chin. "Number." The word struck the room with surprising force. Julian stared at her. Grace had worked for him 6 years. She knew where bodies were not buried because Julian rarely needed bodies. She knew which companies were clean, which were not, and which men smiled too much when violence was mentioned. She had never once raised her voice to him. She did not raise it now. She should have left sooner. Julian's face hardened. "You think I hurt her? I think you keep calling it protection because it sounds better than fear." His eyes narrowed. Grace continued before courage could fail her. "You paid her studio, moved her into your building, dressed her, watched her, controlled the people around her, and then acted surprised when she noticed the walls. I kept her safe. You kept her close." The distinction cut. Julian looked away. Grace softened, but only slightly. "People do not stay because you lock the door beautifully." The sentence remained after she left. Julian sat at his desk and opened the contract Avery had signed. For the first time, he read it not as leverage, not as protection, not as structure. He read it as she must have. Residence requirement, security compliance, confidentiality, public conduct, personal risk. He saw every polite phrase for what it was. A hand around the wrist. A door without a lock that still told her where she could sleep. A choice dressed well enough to pass in public. By noon, Julian had his legal team on the phone. By 2, he had termination papers drafted. By 4, he had removed Tyler from every cross payroll, erased the repayment structure, and transferred the studio support into an independent trust that did not require Avery's contact with him. At 5:17, Eli entered without knocking. Julian looked up. "What?" "Tyler Monroe is missing." Julian stood. "What do you mean, missing?" "He did not show up for his counseling appointment." "His phone is off. his apartment door was open. Julian felt the old instinct rise instantly. Find who took him. Break the first man. Make the second talk. Burn the path from threat to source. Then he saw Avery in the broken studio. Do not become worse because I got hurt. His hands curled against the desk. Graham Julian said. Eli nodded. Most likely. Does Avery know? Not yet. Julian grabbed his coat. She hears it from me. But Avery already knew. Graham Vance had sent the photo straight to her phone. Tyler, tied to a chair in a warehouse near the river blood at his lip, eyes wide with terror. The message beneath it was simple. Tell Cross to come alone if he wants to stay respectable. Avery did not call Julian. She called Tyler's name 3 times in an empty studio as if the sound could drag him back through the phone. Then she did the reckless thing. She took her keys and drove toward the river. The warehouse district was gray under evening rain. Avery's headlights cut through puddles and chain-link shadows. Her hands shook on the wheel, but she did not stop. She found the address in the message. An abandoned storage building near the water brick walls, stained black broken windows staring out at the river. The door was open. Inside, the air smelled of rust and oil. Avery. Tyler's voice came from the center of the room. He was tied to a chair beneath a hanging light. His face was bruised. Relief and horror crossed it when he saw her. Why did you come? Because I am apparently still stupid. A slow clap echoed from the shadows. Graham Vance stepped into the light wearing a raincoat over an expensive suit. His face looked thinner than it had at the gala, his charm stripped down to bone. Family devotion, he said. Touching. Julian does know how to pick weaknesses. Avery stood still. He destroyed himself. You just handed him the paperwork. Graham's smile flickered. You sound like him. That is the cruelest thing you have said tonight. He moved closer. Do you know what Julian Cross took from me? A deal you did not deserve. My name, Graham snapped. My investors, my family's trust. Do you know what men like us are without reputation? Avery looked at the damp floor, the cheap rope, the gun visible beneath his coat. Still men with more chances than most. His face hardened. You think this is about money. I think this is about humiliation. Graham stared at her. Avery's voice shook, but she kept it steady enough. You wanted Julian to become the monster everyone says he is. You wanted proof. So you took my brother and waited for him to arrive angry. Graham smiled again. There she is. Smarter than she looks. Avery heard tires outside. Then footsteps. Julian entered with Eli and 2 security men behind him. Not alone. Graham's hand moved to his gun. Julian stopped immediately. Avery looked at him. For one suspended second, she saw the old Julian there. The one who could end this room with one gesture. The one who had built an empire by making fear faster than law. His eyes went to Tyler. To the bruise, to Avery, to Graham's son. Graham laughed. Come on, Cross. Show her. Show them all. Julian's hand moved inside his coat. Avery shook her head once. Not for Graham. For Julian. Do not. Julian looked at her, and everything in him seemed to fight itself. Then he slowly removed his hand from his coat. Empty. Graham's smile faltered. Julian spoke calmly. You are being recorded. Graham went still. Eli lifted his phone slightly. A red light blinked. Outside, blue lights washed over the broken windows. Police cars. Real ones. Not bought silence. Not private cleanup. Not a body dropped into a story no one could prove. Graham's face twisted. You called the police. Julian looked almost bored, but Avery could see the strain in his jaw. You committed kidnapping, extortion, assault, and conspiracy. I thought the city should enjoy the paperwork. Graham raised the gun. Eli moved faster than Avery could follow. The shot went into the ceiling. Graham hit the floor hard, Eli's knee between his shoulders, the gun skidding across concrete. Tyler shouted. Avery ran to him, fingers fumbling with the ropes. Julian did not touch Graham. He did not threaten him. He did not even look satisfied. He watched the police enter and let them take Graham Vance away alive. When Tyler was free, he collapsed into Avery's arms, shaking. I'm sorry, he kept saying. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Avery held him because she was too tired to do anything else. Across the warehouse, Julian stood in the rain, blown through the open door, looking at his empty hands like he did not recognize them. Later that night, after statements and paramedics and too many questions, Julian came to the studio. Avery was alone. Tyler was at the hospital with Mia bruised but safe. Eli waited outside. Rain whispered against the windows. Julian entered carrying a folder. Avery stood near the bar. "You should not be here," she said. "I know." He did not come closer. He placed the folder on the floor halfway between them, then stepped back. "What is that?" "Termination of the contract. Tyler's debt is gone. Not hidden. Gone. His employment with my company is ended. The studio funding is in an independent trust through the recital season. You do not have to see me speak to me or owe me anything to receive it." Avery stared at the folder. Her throat tightened. "Why?" Julian's voice was quiet. "Because you were right." She looked at him. He continued. "I confused being needed with being trusted. I confused fear with loyalty. I confused holding on with love." The words did not sound rehearsed. They sounded dragged out of him. "I told Tyler the truth." Avery's eyes burned. "All of it." "Yes." "What did he say?" Julian looked down. "He asked what he owed me." Avery almost smiled, but it broke before it formed. "What did you say?" "That he owed you a life you did not have to keep rescuing." A tear slipped down her cheek. Julian saw it and did not move. That restraint hurt more than comfort would have. "What do you want?" she asked. His answer came without hesitation. "Nothing you do not choose." The studio went very still. Avery looked at the man who had once filled every room by owning it now standing near the door, as if permission were something sacred. "And if I choose never to see you again." His face changed, but he nodded. "Then I learned to be better where you cannot see it." She closed her eyes. The rain fell harder. When she opened them, Julian was still there. Waiting. Not demanding. Not arranging. Not protecting her from the silence. Just waiting. Avery walked to the folder and picked it up. Her fingers brushed the paper. Free. The word should have lifted something from her chest. Instead, it made the ache wider. "Goodbye, Julian," she said. He swallowed. "Goodbye, Avery." He left without looking back. She listened to his footsteps fade down the hall, then to the front door, closing, then to the rain filling the space he had left behind. For the first time since she had walked into Cross Harbor Tower, Avery Monroe had no contract, no debt, no diamonds, no rules written by a dangerous man. Only her studio, her brother alive, her mother's photograph watching from the desk, and a heart that had learned the shape of a cage too late to pretend it had never mistaken one for shelter. For 3 months, Avery Monroe did not see Julian Cross. She heard his name, of course. New Orleans was not large enough for a man like Julian to disappear, even when he stopped making noise on purpose. His name moved through the city in pieces. A waterfront contract withdrawn. A private gaming room closed without explanation. A shipping partnership dissolved. A security subsidiary sold. Men who used to speak for him suddenly speaking around him. Reporters circling the edge of a story they could smell but not yet name. Avery did not ask questions. She told herself she did not care. Most mornings, she arrived at Monroe Dance Academy before sunrise and unlocked the front door while the streetlights still glowed over damp pavement. She turned on the lamps, checked the mirrors, wiped down the bar, and stood for a moment beneath her mother's photograph before the first student arrived. The studio was alive again. Not the same as before. Nothing repaired is ever exactly what it was. The new paint still looked brighter under certain light. The new mirrors held reflections too sharply. The repaired front door closed with a heavier sound. But children ran through it again. That mattered. Emma's mother paid tuition in 2 installments and cried when Avery told her not to apologize. The advanced students learned the spring recital piece with the kind of seriousness only teenagers could bring to art and heartbreak. Mia kept the front desk running with a color-coded system Avery pretended to understand. Parents whispered less and smiled more. Tyler came every afternoon after work. Real work this time. Not arranged by Julian. Not managed by Julian. Not designed by anyone but Tyler and the small humiliating steps of responsibility. He stocked shelves at a grocery store 4 mornings a week. He attended recovery meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. At the studio, he cleaned floors, carried equipment, repaired loose chairs, and learned to sit with silence when Avery did not feel like making him feel forgiven. One evening, she found him alone in the storage room untangling recital lights with his jaw clenched. "You can go home," she said. He did not look up. "I said I would finish. You also said that about community college 3 jobs and becoming a personal trainer." He winced. "I deserved that." "No," Avery said. "You expected it. There is a difference." Tyler looked at her then. He was thinner than before. Not in a sick way. In a way that made his face seem more honest. Shame had burned some softness out of him, but effort had put something better in its place. "I do not know how to make it right," he said. Avery leaned against the doorway. "You do not make it right by suffering loudly." "I know. Do you?" He nodded slowly. "I think so." She stepped into the room and picked up one end of the tangled lights. "You make it right by becoming someone I do not have to rescue." His eyes reddened, but he did not cry. For once, he knew better than to ask her to comfort him for hearing the truth. Across the city, Julian Cross was learning a different kind of silence. The first thing he sold was the gaming operation. Grace Holloway brought him the final report at 7 in the morning. She placed the folder on his desk and stood with her arms folded. "You understand, this was one of the most profitable divisions." Julian signed the transfer papers. "Yes. You also understand the buyers are going to strip it for parts and ask why you let it go so quickly." "Yes." Grace watched him. "Do you want me to ask why?" "Number." "Good, I was going to anyway." Julian looked up. Grace did not blink. He set the pen down. "Because no legitimate future starts in a room built for desperate men to lose what they do not have." Grace's expression softened by 1 careful inch. "That sounds like something Miss Monroe would say." Julian looked back at the papers. "No," he said. "It sounds like something I should have known before she had to say it." The second thing he did was harder. He called every man who had made money from the parts of his empire he no longer wanted to own. Some were loyal. Some were frightened. Some were offended because men who profited from darkness often called accountability betrayal. In a private warehouse near the river, 10 of them sat across from him under buzzing lights waiting for the old Julian to return. Julian stood at the head of the table. The gaming rooms close. The debt enforcement contracts end. Any collection tied to threats, injury, or coercion stops tonight. A man named Russo laughed. Russo had worked with Julian for 12 years. He was broad, loud, and stupid enough to mistake cruelty for strength. "You find religion boss." "Number." "A woman, then." The room went still. Julian looked at him. Russo smiled too wide. "That little ballerina did a number on you." Eli shifted near the door, but Julian lifted one hand. The old instinct was there. It rose clean and familiar. Make an example. Break the smile. Remind the room what fear could do. Julian let the silence stretch until Russo's smile began to fail. Then he said, "You are done." Russo blinked. "What?" "You no longer represent me. You no longer operate under my protection. Your accounts are being closed. Your access is revoked." Russo stood so fast his chair scraped backward. "You think you can cut me out. I just did. You are getting soft." Julian stepped closer. Every man at the table stopped breathing. His voice remained quiet. "No, I am getting precise." Russo's face paled. Julian did not touch him. That was the part that frightened the room most. Men who had once trusted violence understood absence better than mercy. They knew what Julian was choosing not to do, and the choice made them uncertain. Uncertainty was not redemption, but it was a start. By the end of the second month, the rumors grew teeth. Some said Julian Cross was weakening. Some said federal investigators were circling. Some said he had fallen in love with the dancer who left him and taken half his empire apart trying to find the man she thought he could be. Avery heard that last one from Mia, who tried to deliver it casually while sorting costume invoices. Avery looked up from the desk. Who said that? My cousin heard it from a bartender who heard it from a city clerk who probably made it up. That is not a source. It is New Orleans. That is practically a sworn statement. Avery went back to the invoices. Mia sat across from her. You can ask about him. I do not want to. You looked at that same invoice for 4 minutes. It is a complicated invoice. It says Tool. Avery set the paper down. Mia's voice softened. I am not telling you to forgive him. I know. I am not even telling you to see him. I know. I am saying you can miss someone and still know leaving was right. Avery looked toward the studio floor where the younger students were practicing in uneven lines. Emma fell out of a turn, frowned, and started again without waiting to be told. I do miss him, Avery said quietly. Mia reached across the desk and touched her hand. Avery did not cry. That surprised her. Maybe grief changed shape when no one was trying to manage it. The scholarship letter arrived 2 weeks before the recital. It came from the Ashford Arts Foundation, printed on thick cream paper that looked too expensive for the studio mailbox. Avery opened it between classes expecting a donation acknowledgement or an invitation to something she would not attend. Instead, she read the first paragraph twice, then a third time. Mia leaned over her shoulder. What is it? Avery handed her the letter. The foundation wanted to fund a full outreach program through Monroe Dance Academy. Transportation. Shoes. Tuition. Meals during long rehearsal days. Partnership classes in 3 schools where children rarely had access to classical arts training. The program would carry Lena Monroe's name. Mia covered her mouth. Avis. Avery sat down slowly. At the bottom of the letter was Beatrice Ashford's signature. No mention of Julian. None. That was how Avery knew. She called Beatrice from the office phone because her hands were not steady enough for her cell. The older woman answered on the 3rd ring. I wondered how long it would take. Avery closed her eyes. He did this. He made a donation. Beatrice. A significant anonymous donation structured through my foundation with no public credit and no control over how you use it. Avery looked through the office window at her students. Why? Because I imagine he wanted to give you something he could not hold. The words sat quietly inside her. Did he ask you to tell me? Number. Then why are you? Because I am old rich and enjoy interfering. Avery almost laughed. Beatrice's voice softened. He is changing Avery. Avery looked at the cracked edge of her mother's old watch. People say that when men become quieter. I do not mean quieter. I mean poorer. Avery blinked. Beatrice continued. He has walked away from profitable things. Dirty things, yes, but profitable. Men around him are angry. Some are circling. It would be safer for him to remain what he was. Avery said nothing. He is not doing this well, I imagine. Men rarely do. But he is doing it where you cannot see. Avery swallowed. That does not mean I should go back. No, Beatrice said. It means when you decide what you want, you can decide with both eyes open. That night, Avery stayed late at the studio. She stood in the center of the empty room, the scholarship letter open on the piano bench. Rain tapped at the windows. Her mother's photograph watched from the desk. For years, Avery had believed legacy meant preservation. Keep the studio open. Keep the photograph clean. Keep the same classes, the same dreams, the same rituals, because changing anything felt like letting her mother disappear. Now, the letter lay in front of her offering something larger. Not a museum, a living thing. The next morning, Avery drove to the cemetery. Lena Monroe was buried beneath a magnolia tree on the edge of a family plot that did not belong to their family. A friend of Beatrice's had arranged it years ago when Avery had been too broken to question Grace. Avery knelt in the wet grass and brushed leaves from the stone. Hi, Mom. The wind moved through the magnolia branches. Avery took the scholarship letter from her coat pocket and unfolded it. They want to name a program after you. Her voice shook. Not just the studio. A real program. Schools. Children who cannot pay. Shoes and buses and teachers and everything you used to say should exist if the world were built by people who remembered being poor. She laughed softly through tears. I thought keeping everything the same was how I kept you. But maybe I was just afraid that if the studio changed, I would have to admit I changed too. Avery pressed her fingers to the name carved in stone. I loved him. There. The truth. It did not break the sky. It did not summon judgment. It simply stood between her and her mother like a candle in rain. I think I still do. But I love myself differently now. The wind shifted. Avery folded the letter and stood. I'm going to build it, she whispered. Not because he paid for it, because we dreamed it first. The recital arrived on a warm Friday evening in April. The small theater near the university filled with parents, donors, students, teachers, board members, and people Avery had only seen before in rooms where Julian's name changed the air. Beatrice sat in the front row wearing pearls and an expression that dared anyone to disappoint her. Daniel Park arrived with his daughter, who brought flowers for Avery and rolled her eyes when her father introduced her too proudly. Councilwoman Royce came too stiff but polite and handed Mia a check for the outreach program without making a speech. Tyler worked backstage with a headset and a clipboard, taking his assignment with the solemn panic of someone guarding national security. You look terrified, Avery told him. I am in charge of 12 children with glitter and 2 costume changes. Good. Fear means you understand the job. He smiled. Then his face softened. Mom would be proud. Avery looked away before her eyes could fill. Yes, she said, she would. The recital began. Tiny dancers stepped into light. Music rose. Tights wrinkled at ankles. Ribbons came loose. One child waved to her grandmother. Another forgot the choreography and copied the girl beside her with great confidence. The audience loved them for it. Then, the advanced students performed the new piece Avery had choreographed after the studio attack. It began in stillness. One dancer alone, then another joining, then another. A line forming, breaking, reforming. The movement was not about perfection. It was about rebuilding without pretending nothing had fallen. Avery watched from the wings with one hand over her mouth. At the final pose, the theater stood. Applause filled the room until it felt like weather. When Avery stepped onto the stage to thank the audience, the lights blinded her for a moment. She spoke about the students, the parents Mia, the new outreach program, and the mother whose name would live through every child who walked into the studio believing art was for someone else. She did not mention Julian. Then she saw him. Back row, near the exit. Black suit. Still posture. No entourage except Eli standing several seats away. Julian did not move forward, did not claim a seat beside Beatrice, did not let the room turn him into part of the announcement. He simply stood where he could leave without being noticed. But Avery noticed. Her voice caught for half a second. Julian's eyes met hers from the dark. He did not smile. He only inclined his head. Respect, not ownership. Avery finished her speech. Afterward, the lobby filled with flowers, photographs, laughter, and children running in costumes, while parents begged them not to spill juice. Avery was pulled from one conversation to another. Beatrice kissed her cheek. Daniel's daughter asked about summer classes. Councilwoman Royce said the program could become a model for city partnership if Avery was willing to sit through terrible meetings. Avery said she was. By the time the crowd thinned, Julian was gone. Or so she thought. She found him at the studio later that night. The theater cleanup had taken hours, and Avery returned to Monroe Dance Academy close to midnight with a box of flowers in her arms and aching feet. Mia had taken Tyler home. The street was quiet. Rain had started again, soft and steady. The light inside the studio was on. Avery stopped outside the door. Through the glass, she saw Julian standing near the bar, alone. He was looking at her mother's photograph. Avery unlocked the door and stepped inside. Julian turned. Neither of them spoke at first. The room felt smaller than she remembered, warmer. The rain made silver lines down the windows, and the new mirrors reflected them both from a dozen angles. "You came," Avery said. "Yes." "You stood in the back." "Yes." "Near the exit." "Old habit." She set the flowers on the desk. "You could have come inside." His eyes held hers. I did not know if I was allowed. The answer moved through her slowly. "You are standing inside now." "Yes," he said, "because you opened the door." Avery leaned against the desk. "You funded the scholarship." Julian did not deny it. "Through Beatrice." With no name. "It was not for my name." "Since when?" His mouth curved faintly, but the sadness stayed. "Since I learned how much damage I can do trying to be seen." Avery studied him. He looked different, not softer. Julian Cross would never be soft in the simple way. But the sharpness had changed direction. Less like a blade looking for a throat, more like a tool learning what not to cut. "I heard about the businesses," she said. "People are talking. People always talk." "Yes. Are you safe?" His eyes warmed at the question. "Mostly." "That is not an answer. It is the honest one." Avery looked down. "I do not know what to do with you." Julian nodded. "I know. You hurt me. I know. You helped me. I know. I hate that both are true." His voice was quiet. "So do I." The rain filled the silence. Julian reached into his coat pocket and took out a small velvet box. Avery's heart stopped. "Julian." He did not open it. "I am not asking tonight." She stared at him. He placed the box on the piano bench, then stepped back. "This was bought weeks ago, before I understood how wrong it would be to ask while anything between us still felt like debt." Avery looked at the box as if it might burn. "Then why bring it?" "Because I am done hiding the parts that make me vulnerable just because they give someone else power." His hands were empty at his sides. "I love you, Avery. I loved you badly before. I loved you with fear in my mouth and control in my hands. I'm trying to become a man who does not make love feel like a room with one exit." Her eyes filled. He continued, "I will not ask you to belong to me. I will not ask you to fix me. I will not ask you to make the city forgive me. If you tell me to leave tonight, I will leave. If you tell me to come back in a year, I will come back in a year. If you tell me never, then I will spend the rest of my life becoming better without using you as proof." Avery pressed a hand to her chest. For so long, every version of love had needed something from her. Tyler needed rescue. Her mother needed memory. The studio needed sacrifice. Julian had needed legitimacy, then forgiveness, then the chance to become someone else. Now he stood in front of her asking for nothing he could take. That was the most terrifying thing of all. She walked to him slowly. Julian did not move. Avery stopped close enough to touch him, but did not. "May I?" she asked. His breath caught. Then he nodded. Avery lifted her hand and touched his face. He closed his eyes. The great and dangerous Julian Cross stood in her studio under fluorescent lights and rain shadow undone by the gentleness of her palm. Avery smiled through tears. "You asked me once if I had ever been touched like I had a choice." His eyes opened. "I remember. I have now." Julian's face changed. Hope was a dangerous thing on him. It made him look younger, almost unguarded. Avery glanced at the velvet box. "I'm not saying yes tonight. I know. I am not saying no." His voice roughened. "I know." She took his hand. Not because he reached for her, because she chose to. Months passed after that. Not like a montage. Not like a miracle. Like real time. Slow, difficult, uneven. Julian came to the studio when invited. Sometimes he sat in the office while Avery worked and said nothing for an hour. Sometimes he helped Tyler repair shelves, and the two men moved around each other with the awkward care of people connected by harm and trying not to make more of it. He attended city meetings and let people insult him without buying their silence afterward. He lost money. He made enemies. He made smaller promises and kept them. Avery expanded the Lena Monroe outreach program into 3 schools, then 5. She hired 2 more instructors. She taught fewer classes herself and felt guilty about it until Mia told her leadership was not abandonment. Tyler reached 6 months without gambling and brought Avery a cheap grocery store cake to celebrate. It said, "Sorry I was an idiot," in blue icing. Avery cried so hard she had to sit down. On the first anniversary of the night Avery signed Julian's contract, he walked into the studio after the final class carrying no flowers, no diamonds, no grand gesture. Just 2 coffees, one black with a splash of cream. Avery took hers. "You still know my order. I know many things. I'm trying not to weaponize them." She laughed. The studio was empty except for them. Evening light stretched across the floor. Outside, the city hummed with summer heat. Julian looked at the piano bench where the velvet box had sat for months inside a drawer Avery pretended not to think about. Avery followed his gaze. Her heart began to beat harder. She walked to the drawer and opened it. The box was still there. She picked it up and turned back to him. Julian stood very still. Avery crossed the room and placed the box in his hand. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Avery, ask me." He stared at her. "Are you sure?" She smiled. "I like that question on you." Julian sank to one knee. Not in a ballroom. Not under chandeliers. Not in front of old money or cameras or enemies waiting for weakness. In her studio. On the floor her mother's dream had bought. In the place Avery had saved, lost, rebuilt, and finally chosen for herself. Julian opened the box. The ring was simple. A single stone, clear and bright, set in a thin band that looked like it belonged to a life, not a performance. "I will not ask you to belong to me," he said. "I will not ask you to save me. I will not promise I will never be afraid, angry, or wrong. I can only promise that when I am, I will not make it your cage." Avery covered her mouth. Julian's eyes shone. "I am asking if I can build beside you. Freely, honestly, for as long as you choose me back." Avery looked at the man kneeling before her. The city still knew his name. The past had not vanished. The darkness in him had not turned into light just because love asked nicely. But he had chosen again and again when no one was watching. He had learned to open his hand. Avery whispered yes. Julian bowed his head like the word had struck him. Then he slid the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled. Avery laughed softly through tears. "I have never seen you nervous. I have never had this much to lose." She knelt in front of him and took his face in both hands. "No," she said. "You have never had this much that could stay without being forced." He kissed her then, gently, like a question, like an answer, like every locked door in the world had finally learned how to open from the inside. A year later, Monroe Dance Academy was too loud, too crowded, and more alive than Avery had ever imagined. Children filled the expanded studio. Parents lined the hallway. Mia ran the front desk like a general. Tyler taught the youngest students how to set up mats and always reminded them to watch their step. Beatrice sat in the corner during scholarship showcases and frightened donors into writing larger checks. Julian stood near the doorway as he always did, not because he was ready to leave, because he liked watching people enter. A little girl fell out of a turn and landed hard on the floor. The room quieted. Avery walked over and crouched beside her. The girl's lip trembled. "I messed up." Avery smiled. "Good." The child blinked. "Good. Now you know where the floor is. Try again." The girl wiped her face, stood, and returned to her place. Avery clapped once. Again, not because it was wrong, because it can be better. Across the room, Julian heard the words and looked at his wife. Avery caught his eye in the mirror. He smiled. Not the old smile that warned men away. A real one. Outside, rain began to fall over New Orleans, soft against the windows, turning the streetlights gold. The city was still beautiful, still dangerous, still full of men who mistook fear for power, and women who had survived being underestimated. But inside, the studio music rose. Avery counted the beat. The children moved. And Julian Cross, once the most feared man in the room, stood quietly at the edge of all that light, grateful that love had not saved him. It had given him a choice, and every day he chose,